So today we have a very special guest. Mark Hershberg is the author of the Career Toolkit, Essential Skills for Success That No One Taught You. In our conversation today, we're going to talk about the importance of these skills. We know they matter, and yet they're rarely taught in school or in corporate training. And Mark's written this book to help you to learn those skills. So what sort of things are we talking about? Well, we're talking about how to manage your manager. We're talking about why it's important to learn beyond your role, how to improve your communication style, the idea of being a lazy manager and what does that mean? And then we talk a little bit about leadership, influential leadership versus positional leadership, and that fine balance between leading and following. Let's get started, shall we? Well, hello, beautiful people, and welcome to the Project Joyful podcast. I'm your host, Tracy, your medical herbalist and high performance coach. So, hey, Project Joyful isn't just about being happy. It's about consciously creating a life you love. It's about remembering how to reconnect with your soul-centered joy. You know, that joy that comes from doing what you love, from living on purpose, and from being in a life that allows you to experience deep joy moment by moment. So, hey, let's get started, shall we? So Mark is the author of the Career Toolkit, Essential Skills for Success That No One Taught You. He's educated at MIT and has spent his career launching and fixing new ventures at startups, Fortune 500s, and academia. Mark helped create the Undergraduate Practice Opportunities Program, MIT's Career Success Accelerator, where he's taught for 20 years. He also serves on the boards of nonprofits, Techie Youth, and Plant a Million Corals. Hi, Mark. Welcome to Project Joyful.
Hi, thanks for having me on today.
It's so good to talk to you again.
It is lovely to be here and see you again.
Fabulous. Hey, you know, when I read that you're on the board of Plant a Million Corals, it really touched my heart. Tell me a little bit about how you got involved with that. It's so interesting.
A couple years ago, I was at a conference where I met Dr. David Vaughn and his wife, who are the founders of the nonprofit. David is an expert at growing coral, among other things. He was also, I believe, very good at oysters previous in his career.
Oh, wow.
He was coming up on retirement, and a bunch of us who met him said, wait, you know how to fast grow corals? We need your help, for reasons that he obviously understood. We're losing the world coral population, which, for those who don't know, corals are the cities of the ocean. Most marine life is found near corals. So when we lose the corals, we're losing the areas where fish congregate and marine life congregates, and they have lots of nutrients. And it's a good environment for continuing the species. So loss of coral really impacts the entire ecosystem.
Yeah.
We said, well, if you know how to do this, please don't just retire. Can we get you to go help get new coral out there? They said, well, I know that part of it, but I'm not a business guy.
Yeah.
He said, no, don't worry. We'll take care of that side of the business for you. You just focus on growing coral. We'll help with the rest. So we launched in 2019, I believe. Unfortunately, one of our key partners was the cruise industry, because they're looking at coral populations. Obviously, it helps the environment, but they would love their own proprietary sets of corals so they can bring divers and say, this is our own beautiful private reef. The fish don't care. The fish are going to go anywhere they can find a reef. And of course, the cruise lines are fine with it. But going into 2020, obviously, that was a difficult year for tourism and the cruise industry in particular.
Yeah.
So we had a little bit of a headwind, but we're hoping this year everything's really starting to move forward.
I love that. And it's so important. Like you say, you know, it's so fundamental to the environment. It's fantastic.
Yeah, it's a terrific organization.
I love that. So as we mentioned, you're the author of the Career Toolkit, Essential Skills for Success That No One Has Taught You. And I love the concept of, you know, discovering these skills that not only help us to be better in the workplace, but also help us to be better humans. And also the fact that it's just not taught. Can you tell me a little bit about how you got interested in sharing this message?
When I was early in my career as a software engineer and realized I wanted to become a CTO, a Chief Technology Officer, I looked ahead and said, what do I need to do to become a CTO? I realized it wasn't just engineering skills. It also involved leadership, networking, negotiating, communicating, all these skills no one ever taught me. They're not part of a standard college curriculum.
Yeah.
So I had a skills gap I had to address. As I was learning them, I realized they're not just for the senior executives. These skills are for everyone in an organization. So I
Mm.
began to upskill my team. Now, as I was doing this, MIT had done research. They surveyed companies, and companies said, these are the skills we want, not just in the people we hire from your school. These are skills we want in everyone, but we can't find them.
Mm.
Our approach at MIT, it was to create this career success accelerator. And when I heard they were doing it, I reached out. I said, well, I've been training my team. I'm happy to share some of my materials. They said, well, please come on over, help us design this class, and then invited me to help teach because they wanted to get practitioners as well as professors doing
Mm.
this. So I've been teaching it for 20 years. And again, this is not just for MIT students. So I've been pushing them to expand it. Let's get this out there, not just for our students. MIT pioneered online courseware. For various reasons, they didn't have the resources to do it.
Mm.
And so I thought, I'm going to write up some notes for the class. Our class is very interactive. So students aren't, I think, writing as many notes as I'd like them to. I thought, let me write up some notes for the students. I'm going to give it to them, and maybe we can share this online. We can give it to other schools.
Yeah.
Well, 20 pages of notes, which was my target, became 40, became 80. Once it passed 100, I said, okay, I think this is not notes. I think this is a book. And that's how I got it out there, the book and the app, so I can help other people.
Yeah. That's so important because I know, like, thinking back to my sort of past corporate life as a chartered accountant, a lot of the time you're advanced because, you're good at what you do, but good at what you do is the technical stuff. And there really isn't that sort of enveloping going, okay, so now you're going to be doing different stuff and it's different skills. It's really up to the person to be aware of that.
That's exactly right. Our training has focused just on those pure technical skills.
Yeah.
Now, I want to emphasize here's how to think about these other skills and why they're important. We're going to do a little bit of math because I do teach at MIT. I do like using math, but don't worry, this is middle school math. So I want everyone to picture you've got a rectangle that's 4 by 10,
Mm.
and you're going to increase one of the sides by 2 units to maximize the area. So do you increase the 4 side or the 10 side? Now, if you need a moment, feel free to pause the podcast to think about it. You do remember doing this years ago. Okay, so you've thought about it. And
Yeah.
of course, the answer is we increase the short side. We go from 4 to 6 to get 60 units. Okay, great. What do rectangles have to do with any of this? Well, let's think conceptually what's happening. When you're adding 2 units to that short side, those 2 units are getting amplified by the long side. If you put the 2 units on the long side, they're only amplified by the short side. All of us have short sides and long sides. We tend to focus on those long sides.
Mm.
If you're in accounting, you learn new accounting rules. I'm in technology, I'm going to learn new technologies. And certainly we have to do that. You need to be up on new accounting regulations. I've got to be up on my latest technology. But let's think about an extreme case. Think about that person who might be really technically brilliant, very knowledgeable within your discipline, but that person, not a good team player, not great at communicating, really discombobulated. No one wants to hear him give a talk because, he's just all over the place.
Yeah.
Or boring or anything else. His brilliance gets lost, gets diminished because of that short side, that super short side of communicating or teamwork or whatever it is.
Mm.
And if he just got a little better, we're not talking about now he can stand on the TED stage and do this world-class presentation. Just goes from super boring or super confusing to, okay, yeah, I can follow along. That makes sense. That brilliance, that long side, is now so much more applicable, so much more useful because other people want to engage with him.
Mm.
So all of us, we have long sides, typically our domain expertise, and certainly continue to invest in that. But on hour for hour basis, you will get a much better return focusing on some of your short sides and making those just a little bit longer.
I love that because also by focusing on those short sides, it allows us to serve more and it allows us to deepen our relationships, which has an impact on what's going on at home as well as what's going on at work.
Absolutely. When you think of skills like leadership or networking, negotiating, communicating, these aren't just in-office skills. We negotiate all the time with our spouse. Our networks help us not just finding jobs and customers, but things for our kids to do, or other types of things we want to learn and know about. So all these skills really do apply beyond our office walls.
Yeah, fantastic. Now, there's a lot of research around that shows one of the biggest stresses is in relation to poor management, or it even is as bold as saying bad management. Now, I know you go into a lot of detail, not just about being a better manager, but also about how to manage your manager as well. Do you want to talk a little bit about that?
This is one of those short sides many people have. They might be technically very capable. Of course, technical here means broadly within your discipline, not just the software technology I do.
Yeah.
But imagine you want to pitch an idea to your boss. Your boss may have a certain style that she likes. Perhaps she's a type who says, okay, I want you to write up a proposal, put in all the details, email it to me so I can look it over, and then we can talk about it. On the other hand, you might have a boss who's more big picture, says, I don't want to read through all this stuff. Just come into my office and let's just talk about it. Well, if you go and apply an approach with the wrong style, if she's the type who wants that report and you walk into her office and say, hey, listen, I've got this great idea. Let me tell you about it. So you go, okay, yeah, okay, that good. No, I like it, but she's not ready to hear that message. She's not going to be as receptive.
Yeah.
So you want to recognize her style and match to it. And by the way, this is true not just for your manager, for all your coworkers. We all have these styles. So learning subtle things like that, that's just one example, but understanding the subtle ways that your coworkers and your manager like to engage can help you be more effective when you do need to engage with them.
Yeah. And what could you do to learn more about your manager or your key colleagues' preferred style of communication?
Some of it, we go in chapter 7, the communication chapter in the book. I go into a lot of detail about different communication models and ways to start to understand it. But you can also be direct. You can ask, what exactly do you prefer? How do you like me to send you new ideas? That's a perfectly acceptable answer to a question to ask. And by the way, I had a case years ago. I just joined a company and I found out 2 weeks later, the CEO is really upset with me. I was there to rebuild an entire system. And I found out that our vendor had a plan. I looked over their plan. I thought their plan made a lot of sense. Now, that's a good plan. He was very frustrated because I didn't have a plan. Thought, okay, I thought the vendor's plan was good, but if you want me to create one, I'll create one. He said, yeah, I want to see a plan from you. I said, okay, no problem. We'll get you a plan. Just so we're clear, I want to make sure I'm getting you what you want. Are you expecting a written project proposal? Do you want to see me do a PowerPoint presentation to you? Do you want a Gantt chart? Do you want a budget? Do you want a timeline? I want to understand to make sure I give you what you're looking for. And he said, oh, I don't know. I don't know. Okay, well, this is going to be a problem because chances are I am not going to give him what he wants, given that he doesn't know.
Yeah.
So if your boss doesn't know, that's probably a red flag. If a coworker doesn't know, especially a junior person, they might still be maturing, but certainly your boss should know. If your boss doesn't, that's a red flag. Perhaps you can help your boss figure it out. This guy, clearly, I was not going to help him figure it out. And it's time to exit.
That's really interesting. So, in terms of talking about learning beyond your role, we've talked about the short sides and the long sides. What else is there in relation to learning beyond your role?
What I have found time and again, especially when I would go in as a consultant, is I talk to someone, I tell you, what do you do here? Okay, great. Hey, your coworker 20 feet from you, what does he do? I think he's in marketing. Yeah, he's in marketing. Okay, what's his name? Don't know. What does marketing do? I think we run ads, maybe our website, and that's it. And they sit there with blinders on. They barely know the people around them. They certainly don't understand what they do except at a very conceptual level. And you can do this in your own company. Obviously, in a company of 5,000 people, you're not going to know everyone. Do you even know everyone on your floor? You will find quite often people do not. Although I suppose in fairness today, you probably just got back to the office and there might be a lot of new faces given what we went through. But people really just focus on their particular business unit, their particular team. And maybe, oh, I know my HR rep, or I know the person who I give my expense reports to, and that's it. By learning what the other groups do, we can begin to understand where there might be opportunities, where there might be risks. We understand our whole business better.
Mm.
And so if, for example, you're an engineer and you learn about what your customer support team does, you might say, hey, I noticed that our team seems to be at the end of every month, they have to go generate all these reports, seem to spend a lot of time doing it. We could actually automate those reports. Ideally, a product person should have figured that out, but why wait and count on that? You might hear, oh, a customer has this need. I know as a CTO, I often say, look, I need to be in some customer meetings, not all, because your salespeople and even your product people, while they listen, they might not hear things the way I hear it as a technologist.
Yeah.
And I might see different opportunities. I'm giving it from a perspective of a technology person, but still, you could imagine, for example, a salesperson here's an engineer talking about why we need to build something. A salesperson says, I'm assuming that was technically correct, but your sales pitch was terrible. Hey, I can teach you a couple things about how to sell an idea to make you more effective. We can all learn from each other and learn more about our industry and our company to be more effective in our roles.
And to have more enjoyment in your role as well, right?
Yes, and to get to know your coworkers.
Yeah, it's so important, especially these days when connection is such a rare thing. The more we can do to connect and feel like we're part of one sort of organization, the better we can get along.
And that, by the way, is something that likely got worse during the past 2 years with COVID. Internal networking is something so many people ignore. People think of networking as this is what I do when I look for a new job. Or maybe for a client, it's always external. But those internal networks are really important because they're going to help you understand what's happening in the business. They might alert you to risks or opportunities. Hey, did you hear we're thinking of divesting this particular group or we're acquiring a company? What will that mean for your job, risks and opportunities? By having a good internal network, you will be aware of what's going on and you will see more opportunities to capitalize on.
Yeah, I love that. And also, one of the things we talk about at Project Joyful is in relation to influence and persuasion. It really is a service because what you're doing is you're saying, how can I help you to get to where you want to be or what you want to deliver? What can I do to support that? And if you're learning outside of your role, you're already opening the door to be able to do that.
Absolutely. And all of us benefit by taking a broader perspective and seeing the bigger picture, not just what we're doing day to day.
Yeah, that's true. And nothing feels worse when you're in the silo and some stranger pokes their head over the top. You've never met them before, but they've been there for 5 years. And then you realize, oh, actually, they need something from me.
Exactly. Or worse, you need something from them, but have no relationship with that person.
Yeah, it just makes it so much harder, right?
Yep.
Yeah, totally. I love that. Now, tell me about this idea around a lazy manager. What's that?
There's an expression in software about a good programmer is a lazy programmer. But in fact, the original origin comes from, I'm blanking on the guy's name. If you've ever read the book Cheaper by the Dozen,
Oh, yeah.
it's based on the father of the author is the efficiency expert. He's a very famous one in the 1920s, would do the time and motion studies.
Yeah.
He's the guy who would look at people on the assembly line and say, oh, you can do this in 7 seconds instead of 8.2. Translated to saving money. He found that the lazy bricklayers were the ones who were better. What does he mean by this? They're the bricklayers who got maybe 3 bricks, came over, put down the mortar, put down the bricks, went and got 3 more bricks, came and did them. The lazy ones said, I don't want to walk back and forth and get bricks each time. I'm going to move all the bricks over. I'm going to stack them in a box or a wheelbarrow, bring them all over once, and then do it. I don't have to walk back and forth. I'm lazy. And really, all of us should be lazy. In software, the concept is, well, if I'm lazy, you ask me to do something, I'll do it. You ask me to do it twice. Okay, I don't want to keep doing this. I'm going to automate it.
Nice.
As managers, we should think the same way.
Yeah.
I try to do as little as possible. To do that means I have to find a way to let others do it. Are there ways I can empower my team to make decisions that I really don't need to be there to make? It's not a critical decision. Great, I've empowered them to do that. That frees me up to do something else that is more important. So look at the tasks that you do. Are there ways you can automate them? Are there ways you can delegate them? Can you empower other people to do as little as possible? And then you take your newfound free time and start doing more, fill it up with more higher value tasks.
I like that. So it's a particular type of laziness. What do you do in terms of ensuring that the outcome remains consistent?
Well, of course, we can delegate tasks, we can delegate authority, we cannot delegate responsibility. I am still responsible for my team to deliver a certain thing. If I say, oh, junior people, you go make all decisions and make bad ones, that's on me. So when you train up people, we give them guidance. You might say, I've determined it's going to be one of these 3 vendors. Here's the criteria. Can you go and evaluate those vendors? And this type of task, for example, for you, you might say, oh, great, bunch of vendor calls. I hate vendor calls. I hate sitting through pitches. But maybe a junior person who hasn't really done that, she might think, oh, hey, this is exciting. This is different, new, or look at the responsibility I'm getting. This will be good for her development because she's eventually going to move up to a more senior level. So you're helping her develop. Now, if you just said, go pick a vendor and didn't give her guidance, she might pick the wrong one. But if you say, here's the criteria and here's how to evaluate it, how detailed you have to be versus I do have senior people, I can say, pick a vendor, you get what we're looking for. So how detailed you have to be, how specific and tight those guardrails are, depends on how complex the task is, how much guidance she might need. But if you can give it to her, give her the boundaries, great. She's going to do it. Maybe she just comes back and says, hey, I looked at the 3. I'm thinking this is the right choice and here's why. Here's what I found. That still saved you a number of hours of meetings and you just got the summary.
Yeah.
So if we can do things like that, you save time and your more junior people, they might feel more engaged and they're certainly going to learn new skills to help them as they grow.
I like that. And delegation done the right way is such an important part of mentoring and training, your young graduates and your newer members of the team. I remember when I first started out as an accountant, the financial controller mentored me, and he used to talk about it as in terms of clipping the bus ticket. And it's a lot of things that we don't even realize or think, oh, actually, that's an experience that particular person would really get a lot of benefit from. It's one for the CV. And instead we're thinking, I've just got to get it done. Part of being a great manager is about supporting and developing your team, right?
Absolutely. I believe every manager has an obligation to mentor the people under him.
I like that. That's so good. So let's talk a little bit about leadership. I know you go into a lot of detail in your book about leadership, particularly influential leadership, which I love. Let's talk about that.
The most common mistake I see from people, not just the students at MIT and young people, but I see this in people in their 20s and 30s and even 40s. Their concept of leadership is what's known as positional leadership. Think, I will be a leader when I have a certain title, when I have people reporting to me, when I have authority over them. That is positional leadership. That's not influential leadership. I would even say it's more authoritative, not even leadership, it's authority. In theory, I can say to my team, I'm the boss, and if you want to keep working here, you do what I say. Now, I can do that. I'm not going to have a team very long, certainly not in this labor market. And in fact, even in looser labor markets, if I say to my team, because I said so or because I'm the boss, I know for engineers, for intelligent white collar workers, ones who are motivated not just by money, but by feeling that they're contributing, by being interested in their work, can't just say because I said so.
Yeah.
So even though I have that authority over them, I have to use influential leadership. Influential leadership is where you convince people, you influence them to do something as opposed to commanding them. A classic example, someone like Mahatma Gandhi. Gandhi had zero formal authority. He held no government office. He was not put in charge of anything, but he said, I have a vision that we're going to be an independent nation. He convinced other people to join him in that cause and said, if you come with me, I believe together we can do this. And millions of people did. And he took on the most powerful nation in the world at the time and got India with zero weapons, zero force, convinced this powerful nation that they need to do what he wanted. That was influence. He influenced a bunch of other people, and together they influenced England and the United Kingdom to change their policy. That is what we mean when we talk about influential leadership. It's not commanding, not controlling, not threatening, not forcing. It's the power of influence. And that's what we want to do as leaders, even when we have some authority or ability given our position.
Yeah, I love that. And developing and practicing influential leadership, that's not just for, the top level managers. That's something that you can practice even as soon as you come into the organization, because you never know who's noticing what you're doing or how you're doing it, right?
That's absolutely right. And this is the other mistake people make, because they think, well, leadership's just at that level. So I'm an individual contributor, I'm not a leader yet. In fact, companies want you, even as an individual contributor, to be a leader. And being a leader can mean you're the most junior person on the team. We're sitting around a meeting. Everyone's saying, well, let's go in this direction. You say, hold on, wait a second, everyone. I have an idea. We should go in this other direction. And here's why. And you convince a bunch of people. And at the end of the day, they say, you're right. Let's all go that way. You have now led. You might not manage through the execution. It might still be the team lead or project managers. Okay, let's work out the details and who's working on what. But you led the team in that direction. Every company wants that. And if you are a manager, a leader, an executive, you want your team to do that. Encourage this, foster these traits in your team, because a team of leaders, they're not going to take away from your leadership. They're only going to provide it more. In fact, this goes back to our earlier statement, be a lazy leader. Great. You lead the team for a little bit, and I'm going to focus on not one step ahead. That's where you're focusing. I'm going to focus 2 steps ahead.
Yeah.
So let more of your people lead.
Nice. And what advice would you give sort of middle tier managers in terms of what they can do to support their team in developing that skill?
These skills need to be developed differently than how we've usually been trained. If you think about what you learned in high school and university, it was memorization. The teacher stood at the board, wrote down some dates or formulas, and you copied them down. And then on a test, you said, I'm going to use this formula. Even our corporate training, we say, oh, we're going to send you to this 2-day seminar. So imagine if you were recruiting a basketball team. So, okay, welcome to the team. Listen, you're new on the team. We're going to send you to a 2-day basketball clinic. Now, welcome back from our clinic. Hope those 2 days were great. You're done training. You're good. We're just going to play, but no more training for you. You had 2 days. What more do you need?
Yeah, good luck with that.
Right. Yes, that's what we do. We say, oh, you're promoted. Here's your 2-day training. You're done. And during that training, they say, oh, here's the 3 things to remember. You're done. Write these 3 things down. It's not that simple. There are no 3 things to always lead. There's no formula that magically communicates every time. It's closer to learning a sport like basketball. What do? You say, okay, well, we're going to have to regularly train. That means we do drills, we do scrimmage games, we might watch a videotape of ourselves and look, and what are we doing well or not? Oh, we have a competition coming up. Let's look at the tape of the other players. What's our strategy going in? That is how we continue to learn and develop. That's what we want to do within our organizations. Now, there's an easy way to do this. Create peer learning groups. I recommend groups of about 6 to 8 people, but you can do it with larger groups. And by the way, what I'm about to explain, it's available as a free download on the website that we'll give later.
Cool.
So you create these groups of 6 to 8 people, and you have them come together. I recommend people from different teams, different groups, so you get some diversity of background, as well as classic diversity. You don't have all men or all women. You probably don't want to be too different in terms of seniority. You don't want a senior executive with a junior person. So keep the levels pretty similar. And then this group will take some content. You can use a book like mine. You can use another book. You can use online articles, videos, use a great podcast like this one, and you read a few pages or you listen to an episode and you come together and discuss it. Because it's in that discussion where you say, well, here was the idea. Here were 3 steps given, but let's understand it's not really always those 3 steps. What happens in this case or that case? You're going to say, well, I had a situation 2 years ago, and here's what we did. And it wasn't quite that, but here's why. Oh, wow, that's a really good insight. I never would have thought of that. I'm glad you brought it up. Someone else can say, I have a challenge coming up. I'm trying to figure out how to approach it. We then all help, because you can't say, hey, everyone, I'm going to try leading this afternoon. I'm going to try something new here. And then you screw it up and say, you know what? Do over, take back, forget everything I did this afternoon, pretend it didn't happen.
Yeah.
That doesn't work. But when I help you plan your leading, that's how I get some practice. When you help me plan mine, or when, as we're planning your leading, someone else says, oh, I had a similar situation. Here's what worked. Here's what didn't.
Yeah.
Well, that's like watching the tape or learning from someone else's experience. That's how we practice. It's not, I'm going to stand here and everyone ignore what I'm doing for 5 minutes while I try something different. And then if it doesn't work, forget.
Yeah.
So these groups, they allow for continual learning. Say you meet once or twice a month, only takes maybe 45, 60 minutes, little bit of reading or listening to a podcast. And so you get that continual learning. The advantage is you're upskilling your employees, you're increasing employee engagement. They're saying, great, you're listening, you're helping us grow. We love this. You are building those internal connections. You're helping that internal networking we were talking about.
Yeah.
And you are creating a common language, because if all your groups just read the same part of a book or listened to the same podcast episode, you can reference a story, a term, an analogy. Everyone goes, oh, yeah, I get it. We all heard that. We all know that. So you're helping your communication as well. And there is no cost to any of this. Maybe you buy copies of a book, but again, if you don't want to, use free content out there and you can upskill your entire team or even organization.
I love that. And, that's one of the things we've learned around group learning and group coaching, is that based on everybody's identity and their experiences and the stories they're telling themselves and the filters that we all have on, we're all taking in different pieces of information from the same core piece of content. So it's also another way of understanding it from a different perspective.
Absolutely. And that's what's important here. Learning the quadratic equation, that's very easy. We all look at the equation, we all solve it the same way. I don't need your view on that equation. But leadership, I need to understand how you think about it, how she thinks about it, how he thinks about it, to get the diversity of perspectives. And that's where peer learning really helps.
Yeah, totally. And it's also why, you've read a book and you come back to it 2 or 3 years later and it's like you've never read it before, because you're approaching it from a different experience set.
Absolutely. And so in these groups, over time, you'll probably come back to some of the earlier concepts, but now have just more experiences and more diversity of thought to really approach it in a new way, as you suggest.
Yeah. And I also love the fact that you're creating this safe space, so it gives people an opportunity to experience and experiment with what is their truly authentic leadership style.
Exactly. And again, this is, by the way, is how we teach at MIT. It's how top business schools teach these skills. It isn't just we're going to lecture at you. It is creating these small groups and letting them try and develop the skills in this practice.
Yeah, I love that. That's so powerful. Now, with leadership, especially if you're coming up through the ranks, as they say, it's really important to get that balance right and dial it in terms of when to lead and when to follow. And you talk a lot about that in your book. Tell me more about that.
One of the mistakes young leaders make is they think, well, I have to always be in front. I have to always be seen as leading. First of all, that's exhausting. Second, your team, assuming they're not just very almost automations, they're going to want to be more proactive participants and not just tell me what to do and I will do whatever you say.
Yeah.
So recognize you don't always leading doesn't always mean you're making every decision. Lots of leadership coaches use the famous analogy that wolves, the leader in a wolf pack, leads from behind instead of out front. They're the ones behind, and they make sure no one falls behind, as well as protecting from any, rear predators.
Yeah.
And so you can lead from the front. You can be the one saying, okay, team, I'm going to talk to you about what this new direction we're going in is. But you can lead from behind. You have someone else up front. And good leaders, experienced leaders, know that just because I'm putting you up on stage at this moment, it doesn't diminish me. It doesn't make me look worse. Oh, I wasn't the one up there. Everyone's going to think I'm not in charge anymore. No, you can share your leadership without losing your authority or your leadership.
I love that. And here's a question for our people who are earlier on in their career, if you like. One of the things we talk about a lot is the importance of building your personal brand in the workplace and across your network. Tell me more about that.
All of us have a certain perception. People view us a certain way. If you're not sure what that way is, there's a technique my friend Dory Clark suggests, which is ask each of the people in whatever group you're looking at, maybe your coworkers, maybe people in a certain department, say, can you come up with 3 adjectives that describe me? Any 3 adjectives. It's a simple exercise, doesn't take long. And then you look and say, are there certain patterns? And see how you are being perceived. Now recognize that how you're perceived and how you want to be perceived, there might be a gap. It could align, it may not. So I'll give you a personal example. I have always been perceived as technical. In fact, when people hear, oh, he has 3 degrees from MIT, no one has ever said, oh, gee, will this math be too hard for Mark? Will he understand all the software we're doing, or will that be over his head? No one questions that. They go, oh, MIT. That creates a perception. Now I'm leveraging MIT's brand in doing so, but that, or the fact that I've been a CTO or have the patents or other things, it gives me a certain brand or perception. One thing people didn't believe when I was younger, that I knew about leadership or networking or these other skills. When you think MIT, you think probably really smart, really good at math and STEM. You don't think, oh, those MIT people, they're great networkers. So there are perceptions we carry. Now, in both cases, I'm leveraging the MIT brand in myself, but it could be where you're educated, could be your job title, could just be how you behave, how you interact, how people perceive you. Are you the quiet person on the team? Are you the one who talks too much? Are you always the first to volunteer? It could be many different things. However it is, from your actions, from your history, from your resume, how are you perceived? And then if for a particular job, you need to be perceived a certain way. If, for example, you're perceived as very technically competent, but this is a leadership role and they want to see people who exhibit leadership, you have a gap in your perception. You're going to have to change how people see you. So now you qualify for the role. Even if technically you qualify, even if you say, no, I am a leader, if they don't see that, it doesn't matter. So we want to look at how we're perceived, understand, is there a gap between how we're perceived and the next role we want, the next project, what we want to do? And if so, we have to close that gap, whether it's by learning the actual skills or just making people aware that's how we actually are.
So finding opportunities to consistently demonstrate a skill that we're wanting to bring to the forefront of our brand.
Exactly. I don't have to go in and say, let me show you some technical analysis to prove to you I'm really good at the math.
Yeah.
People just believe I am. But early in my career, I had to show that I was good at some of these other skills.
I love that. That's so important. And it's something that, it never goes away. It's something that we're thinking about our whole career. And I think many of us in the beginning, particularly, you're unconsciously building that personal brand. Then comes that awareness, and then it's a matter of deciding and getting clarity on what you want your brand to be about and what you can do to demonstrate that.
Absolutely. It could be little things you're doing at work. Just you are going to be the person who volunteers or helps out others to show you're a team player. It could be things you do outside of work. It could be you might be perceived one way within your company, but no one outside your company knows it. A very common example people give is if you want to be known in your industry, go write articles for an industry publication or go on podcasts and talk about the industry. Within your company, everyone knows, oh, you really get it. But if no one outside your company knows that, your perception, your brand is pretty limited. So you want to address it to that other community.
Yeah, I love that. That's so important. I've really enjoyed talking to you today. I mean, the things in your book, we could talk about those for days, weeks, months. They're so important. And I'm sure people listening today will be like, how do I find out more about that? Or, oh, I've never thought about what my personal brand might be. How can they get in touch with you to find out more?
You can go to my website, thecareertoolkitbook.com. There you can see where to buy it. You can learn more about the book. You can get in touch with me or follow me on social media. There's new content I put out every week. There's the app page, and that will take you to the free app on the Android and iPhone stores, where you can get a lot of the content from the book popping up as a daily reminder to help you retain it. And then there's the resources page, where I link to a number of free online resources and have a number of free downloads, including how to create those peer learning groups within your organization. All of this at thecareertoolkitbook.com.
Fabulous. And we'll also have that link in the show notes to make it easy for all of our listeners to find you.
Fantastic.
Brilliant. It's been an absolute pleasure talking with you today, Mark. Is there
Thanks so much for having me on the show.
Thank you. Any pearls of wisdom you'd like to leave our listeners with?
I'll give you one final concept. Imagine you want to develop negotiation skills. And so you read a book, my book, a different book, you take an online class, you invest just a few hours learning to negotiate a little bit better. So next time you have a job offer, they might be offering you $80,000. But instead of just taking it as it is, you go and negotiate that offer. And you negotiate for $1,000 more. 5-minute negotiation, go from 80 to 81. If you do nothing else, if you stay in that job the rest of your career, you've just earned $1,000 more for the next, say, 40 years of your career. Learning to negotiate a little bit better just got you $40,000. But of course, you're not going to stay in that job for 40 years. You'll have raises, promotions, and other jobs. Learning to negotiate can get you tens of thousands, even hundreds of thousands of dollars more. We're not talking about being the world's best negotiator. We're talking about getting a little bit better, taking that short side from 4 to 6. Now, I use negotiation as an example because we can do the math. This is true for every skill out there. Get slightly better at networking, at leading, at communicating. No one's going to say, oh, you're a slightly better communicator, here's $1,000 more. But being a slightly better communicator, you get put on the better projects. You get perceived better within your organizations. You come across better in interviews or in the public domain where you're writing these articles. Any of these skills will give you the same type of ROI. So just get a little bit better, and you're going to get this massive return over the rest of your career.
That is so brilliant. Really powerful. Thanks, Mark.
Thanks again for having me.
Hey, thanks for listening to today's podcast. Can I ask you a favor? If our conversation spoke to you today, could you please take a moment to leave a 5-star review? Your review will help people discover this podcast, and together we can create a world where there's even more love and more laughter. And if you want to hear more from the Project Joyful podcast, just click the subscribe button. Bye for now.